Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Gray Zone Warfare video. Today I wanted to talk to you about the game's next upcoming update and why I think it's going to be so important for the dynamic in Gray Zone Warfare, how it's going to affect the gameplay and progression itself, and why I think this update is an important one. A complete game changer? Maybe not. I know there's a lot of hype around these updates, especially with Gray Zone Warfare being that the game only has a really major update every 6 months or so, and the hype and anticipation for these updates can be quite big. And as exciting as this update is, it's an update that everybody's been asking for and something people want to see brought to the game, including myself. I think this was a great idea and a great move from the studio themselves. I do want to talk to you about the many good things this update will bring and how much this will affect the gameplay loop, but will it be like that massive game changer type of idea? Not quite, but it's very, very close. And I want to go through the good things first and then possibly the very few not so good things afterwards. So starting things off, everybody knows by now that they are switching their Dark Revelations update, the one that was going to be lore focused, something that I think was going to add a main storyline in the game and finish up the whole lore aspect. And they're going to switch it with their Elite Operators update, which is now renamed to Winds of War because it's bringing in weather and other new things, but it's going to be more of a PvP focus update. In fact, it's almost going to be an entirely PvP focus update. Now, I'm just going through the video that Madfinger's game posted, the roadmap reshaped, where they're talking about doing this change. I can tell that the lead developer behind this game was a little bit reluctant, being that I know he wants this game to be a PvE focused game with PvP elements. That being said, we need to have a lot of both things in terms of content so we can keep the game interesting, keep the game very dynamic. It's what arguably makes games like Tarkov so good, is that every time you're out in a raid, it's different every time. The story that you're experiencing out in a raid is so different every single time, whether you use a different weapon, whether the weather was something you didn't expect, whether there's dynamic enemies or even missions throughout the map. And then of course PvP, which is quite dynamic, being that when you're fighting a human, the engagements are always different. You don't know what the enemy's strategizing. We don't have that type of variety when it comes to AI yet, although the AI in this game is a quite standout feature and I love it very much, but PvP cannot beat the dynamicism of PvP. So again, the lead developer was a little bit reluctant, but ultimately they're happy with this decision of switching their lore update with a PvP focus update that's also going to bring other things that are meant to surprise us, some stuff in there that will be outside of what they mentioned in this video, including 4 new guns they said, and I don't know exactly what they are. I'm reading the Steam page, I'm watching the video. More weapons. The game needs more weapons too, which is important. So all I'm seeing with these updates is that they are listening to the community. People wanted more PvP. They wanted more things to do in terms of dynamic enemy engagement, and this is the perfect way to do it. Do a PvP focus update. Just finished summarizing this update altogether. I want to get into more of the specifics and how it will actually affect the gameplay loop itself and why this is going to be important and why it is going to be such a game changer and why it might not be at the same time. I want to talk about both things. I'm going to start with the biggest feature of this upcoming update, the COPs, which is an acronym for Capture, Occupy, and Protect. These will be points of interest outside of the POIs we have currently in the map that your faction can actually capture and control and use as hubs for turning in missions, interacting with the traders, gearing up, their spawn points. Now, one of the biggest features to adding this to the game is that you don't actually have to go back to the FOB every single time you complete missions and want to turn them in and sell your loot and do all that kind of stuff. This is the first of many welcome changes due to these COPs specifically, and I'm gonna move on to the next one here. Now, by many of these COPs that you can see here on the map, there's going to be a few of them with specialized traders that will sell higher tier loot, specific items that you might need for quests, which makes these specific COPs more desirable by any faction trying to fight over them. They will be protected by the controlling faction's AI, so how you'll take them over is actually you'll kill the AI, you'll kill the players in the area, you'll enter the COPs and commence capturing from there. I'm not sure if that'll work kind of like a capture the flag or like a domination type of idea, but I'm sure it's going to be something along those lines. From what I'm seeing here is when a COP is under attack, that the faction that owns that COP will actually get warned that it's being attacked, and it'll be up to you to either spawn at that COP or at the nearest one, depending on how close the enemies are. Because from my understanding, when they're in the COP, you won't actually be able to spawn inside of it, so you'll have to spawn at the nearest one to go and try and protect it, especially especially if it's a desirable COP that your faction wants. You can already message each other in the game in a squad chat, and you can rally the troops and go take it back. It's a very dynamic gameplay loop they're putting into this game, and I want to actually talk about how it will affect the current gameplay loop specifically. And that's the point of this video. I want to go through all the new things that are happening in this update, talk about how it's actually going to affect the main gameplay loop, which is particularly why I think this update is so important. So what I think will be the biggest change to your current gameplay loop when it comes to these COPs and how it will ultimately affect the entire feel of Gray Zone Warfare is that, say you have a line of missions or a set of missions in a specific area that you want to accomplish, but that area is surrounded in enemy COPs, basically enemy spawn points, where that faction can keep spawning, going to the POI and looting and farming it, which will ultimately make your career going through the story more dangerous, and you don't want that, right? So this could set you up with a massive amount of planning with your squad mates, or even as a lone Rambo type figure, and try and take on these COPs, take them over, and have them as closer spawn points. And of course, this will affect your current playthrough, because if you die trying to do a difficult mission, or if you're on a task that's very tricky, you don't want to spawn far away and take that helicopter all the way back like we currently do. That's kind of annoying. People want to get closer to their objectives so they can get through the game without all that travel time and the downtime, because that's boring. People get tired of it. So this sets you off on missions that you have to think more broadly about, and it unintentionally adds more strategy to the gameplay loop, which I just think is really, really cool. You have things to do. You have to consider the COPs and enemy players. And the reason that's so important is because of the massive amount of dynamic that adds. Are you going to stealth in on a rainy, dark night with MVGs and a suppressor and try to accomplish these missions quietly as you possibly can because you are in enemy territory? You are 4 COPs deep in this area, going to a POI, trying to accomplish this difficult mission? Or will you spend a day or two on a large campaign, rallying your squad and getting people to help you liberate these COPs so you can have an easier time accomplishing these series of missions, whether it's in Banpa or some other tricky area around the map? So to me, this will be one of the biggest parts of the update, and actually one that's integral to the current gameplay loop. And that's what I love about this update. It isn't just something they're throwing that's like an offshoot of Gray Zone Warfare, something that might not fit in the game. This isn't something they're just throwing up against the wall and seeing that sticks. It's actually something that suits the game and will affect all aspects about it by adding, not subtracting, dynamic aspects. So obviously I'm a big fan of this, and I think it's going to change the whole feel of the game more than we even know before jumping in and playing with it ourselves. Now, of course, this brings us to the next few changes that they're adding. When PvP happens anywhere on the map, it will actually highlight a little like 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer circle on the map that anybody can see, so everybody is aware that PvP is happening between 2 enemy factions. This will happen regardless of the COPs. It's just anywhere on the map that this will happen. So when you see those little zones, you'll know that there's an engagement there, and you can of course choose to go help or avoid it altogether. Now, with that little change, they're adding little tracker devices you can put on your gear. Maybe it's a gun or some armor. So say the enemy doesn't loot it or doesn't bring it back to the base to sell it, you can go back and retrieve it without losing it in the brush. This obviously adds a little more dynamic to the game as well. So you go back there to retrieve your gear, the enemy can actually see if there's a tracker on your body. So he could go into your bag, see that you have a tracker placed and is active, and might want to set up an ambush for you coming back. So there is a little bit of a dynamic aspect to that as well. In my opinion, there's no downside to going back and trying to get your equipment again, because if you're really worried, you would just go in naked. You'll know exactly where it is and you'll just go grab it and either get camped and die, or show up, no one actually be there, because armor and gear is actually, it's hard to take in this game. There is a weight system. You could show up, your dead body's going to be there, and it was worth going back anyway. And you want to spend as long looking around, right? It's just a little bit of a quality of life thing, as well as a see if you can type addition to the game. So that's cool. Now, how you will be able to turn off these trackers, say if you steal one off of the enemy or the enemy steals one off of you, you'll actually have to bring it back to their FOB and either sell it or store it, and then that will turn the tracker off. Another cool deterrent of getting your gear stolen that involves these trackers is mortar strikes. They're going to see if they can add them into the game. They are already functioning at enemy FOBs if you decide to go attack one. So say you get killed, you see that your tag is starting to move, which means they have that marked piece of equipment. Maybe they'll try to set up an ambush for you, but instead of you coming back, they are having mortars fall on their head. The mortars are going to be around $10,000, maybe more. They want to make them expensive and rare, but it is going to be something that deters enemies from stealing your equipment. You won't be able to call in these mortar strikes if your teammates or squad squad members are in the danger zone at all. So the mortars will probably say something like how the helicopter says request denied. It'll probably do something like that because you'll have squad mates in the danger zone. So that'll be the one way you can't call those in. Now, how I actually think this is going to affect the core gameplay loop is that in games like this, such as like looter, shooter, extraction type games, you want money sinks. Money sinks are actually an important concept in these types of games because some people do sink way too much time into these games. They get to the end game, and getting bored of these games is something you want to try to avoid. That's why I praise dynamic gameplay in these types of games so much, to keep them interesting even when you're past the end game. Money sinks are a big way to remedy the end game boredom. Things that are very expensive, you've maybe grinded this game, it's your favorite game, you've grinded it way too much, you have endless amounts of money. Mortars are going to be one money sink you can add to your arsenal if you ever need them. So that would be really cool. And yes, you can call them in on the COPs to help you soften up the area to try to get in and accomplish a capture of one of them. I can see this working really well if, say, an enemy has one COP really buttoned down. There's a lot of them there. It's a really heavy fight. I can imagine these COP fights happening for hours, maybe even days, because of how slow and tactical the PvP can be in this game. Say the enemies are really stuck on that COP and you and your team want to get them out of it. Sending in a few mortar strikes would definitely help, and I think it would be a really cool dynamic to the game. Again, something that throws some chaos into that specific gameplay loop. Now, a few final things that they mentioned that they're going to change about the game. Of course, they are always working on the AI. Being that the PvP is such a cornerstone aspect of Gray Zone Warfare, according to everyone over at Gray Zone Warfare, it is a heavily PvE focused game. They're always working on the AI. They're working on more complex ways that the AI will react when you're shooting them. It sounds like they're going to be adding legging to the AI. If you shoot their leg, they're going to be hobbling. They're going to fix up some stuff with the headshots. If a headshot ricochets, they want to add some sort of delirium effect before they get back into the fight. For now, they're just going to make the AI die when you shoot them in the head. Apparently that's not been happening every single time you do that. And then one of the biggest thing is gut shots. When you shoot them in the gut, they're going to react. Obviously the kinetic force of a bullet would make you react if you get shot. This is actually a really big feature. I find when I'm playing a lot of games, when you shoot AI, they don't even react or flinch. It's incredibly immersion breaking. It's incredibly annoying, but this will actually stun the AI slightly and will have an effect when you gut shot them, which it's really cool. I just think it's, whenever you can add this sort of brutal realism to the game, it's very important. Another thing they forgot to mention until the very end, this is actually a huge one. They will be adding something akin to like daily tasks or timed tasks. Now these are going to be really cool for people who are done with PvE or done with doing tasking that day or something like that, or people that need extra rewards, extra money. These are going to be player specific, so you're going to have tasks for solo players. I believe they're going to be adding this into this next update, so you're going to have a task that you have to finish within the hour or within a few hours as a solo player. They're going to have squad specific tasking, again with a time limit, and then they're not going to add this particular thing into the next update. They're going to add faction specific tasking, so it's going to go from solo to squad to the entire faction, whether it's take over a COP or do a certain thing in a specific area. I assume they will be adding more PvP focused tasks. One thing I'm unsure about when it comes to this upcoming update is if they're going to actually add PvP tasks. I know they said they're actually going to add more tasking into the game. I don't know if they were referring to these time tasks or if they were just adding more to the storyline tasks or side objectives, but it was unclear if they're going to be adding any PvP tasks specifically into the game. But PvP specific tasks would add more options for what you want to do in your tasking, whether it's PvP or PvE. Again, another thing that adds dynamic not only to the entire map, but to your story, to your quests, to your campaign through Gray Zone Warfare. When it comes to, I mean, just simply making money, making gear, getting your guys supplies, I think PvP specific tasks would be very cool. There is one more thing I want to talk about, and that is custom made servers. They're going to do a very light implementation of this for this coming update for a specific VIPs or content creators in the game. I assume it's like Clean, Nice Guy. Those are the guys they had in the devlog interview. They want to do things like take away all the AI and they can add up to 120 players, they were saying, something crazy like that. Custom servers will be an important thing going into the future of Gray Zone Warfare for more than just getting into games that cater to your play style. Yes, custom servers are going to get more advanced going into the future of Gray Zone Warfare, where you can play the game to your liking. You have that custom server that's been set the way that you like, how you would enjoy Gray Zone Warfare. But another reason why custom servers are so important is the ever-growing problem of cheating in FPS games. No matter how you deal with it, no matter how you think it should be solved, it is never going to go away. away, and it keeps getting more challenging to get rid of these cheaters. Custom-made servers are great because usually you have an admin of these servers, not just the game developers who are busy overseeing all the servers as well as the game. Custom-made servers has one overseer, one person that can permanently ban an account, and hopefully they'll do things like add IP bans and more specific defense mechanisms when it comes to cheating. You don't want cheating. Right now, cheating is not too bad in Gray Zone Warfare. I have seen it a handful of times, but that's because Gray Zone Warfare isn't popular right now. If this game was blowing up like, say, Tarkov does every wipe, there would be tons of cheating, but there just isn't as much interest. So therefore the cheaters aren't there to stroke their own egos and dominate an entire map with their wall hack. Now back to if I think this update is really going to be that big game changer. Yes, it's going to change the feel of the game. It's going to affect the gameplay loop and the PvE progression specifically in some ways, but will it be that complete game overall? Not exactly. And the reason I say that is because this doesn't change the gameplay loop fundamentally. It will drastically affect how you go through the gameplay loop and how the game feels when you're progressing, but ultimately you go into Gray Zone Warfare, you complete tasks and missions and level up your traders, maybe loot some POIs, get into some PvP, and that's it. When you're done that, you are at the end game, and that is the same as before. The PvP update adds a massive layer to the gameplay loop, but it doesn't actually change it fundamentally. I think the things that they'll bring to the game that will actually do that, and I can mention this here since we're Gray Zone Warfare players, we understand the importance of PvE. If I was making a Tarkov video and bringing up a concept such as this, I'd probably get yelled at in the comments, but way less here. What I'm talking about is the storyline aspects. Once they do bring in that lore update where you can go into Ground Zero and figure out the story, I assume this lore update was going to have a far more expanded mission system and more things you could do in terms of areas of the map that involved more of a science fiction type of feel. Knowing that this game is based off the book Roadside Picnic was a heavily science fiction inspired story with a hazardous exclusion zone you'd have to enter and avoid anomalous obstacles all over the landscape. This story is heavily inspired by that book, and I'm assuming we're going to get into more heavier sci-fi aspects of the storytelling, and that's going to be the fundamental core of the game. So until they change that fundamental core, any other feature won't actually change the gameplay loop in itself. It'll just add extra flavor to it. But I'm still optimistic because when you add more to the fundamental gameplay loop, that's when they'll be able to expand on more of the flavor, which will be the PvP aspects. Say they open up Ground Zero and you have to infiltrate the dangerous landscape. Maybe there's higher loot in the areas, maybe there's end game tasks, then they'll be able to expand even more on the PvP aspects in those areas. Maybe going into that zone is a terrible risk. You possibly have to bring insane amounts of hazmat equipment that could be expensive. It's an area that if you die in due to PvP or PvE encounters, you won't be able to just fly a helicopter back in and run back naked. To me, this would add an extra layer to the risk versus reward, that dynamic gameplay and the fundamental gameplay loop of the PvE storyline. There's a great opportunity with this Ground Zero area, and as you can see on the map, it's huge. It's a massive area that we can't even play on right now. So for me, it adds a huge amount to the game that we could experience by the time Gray Zone Warfare hits its 1.0 release, and I'm quite excited for that. The depth can go pretty damn far when you put your imagination to it, and we've seen how responsive the developers are when it comes to listening to suggestions and what people think this game should be into the future. For me, it's a dream come true to be experiencing something like the world of Roadside Picnic once again outside of the Stalker series, and it's quite refreshing. Those are my current thoughts on the update itself. This update is massive. Dynamic weather, dynamic gameplay such as PvP, and a clear way to get to those things are going to be huge, but not a complete game overhaul, a complete game changer. I don't want to go too far into specifics of how this game could change completely. I'll probably do that on a separate video. But guys, that's all I wanted to talk about with you today, and how this update is going to affect the gameplay loop and what we can expect from the general feel of navigating Gray Zone Warfare. It's going to definitely add a ton more aspects to the game, which I'm excited for. The game just needs a bit more icing on the cake, a bit more of a cherry on top, and I think this will help get us there while the developers are baking this cake. So guys, thank you very much for getting this far in the video. Please like, comment, subscribe, do the things, and I would appreciate that very much, being the small channel that I am. Thank you again, and have yourselves a very nice day.